My name is Brock, and this is the Dungeon Master's Toolkit podcast. On today's episode, I talked to Satya from Paris, France. We talk a little bit about personal horror and how he likes to run his games. We also talk about running one-on-one games, so one player, one game master. And then we talk a little bit about moving the camera and different ways to describe scenes, as well as how the storytelling in game works. And we also cover a pretty big topic over the course of the episode, which is this little tool called player impressions that he uses. A very interesting technique, something that I'm hoping to steal for future games myself. And then finally, to end off the episode, we talk about a couple of games that he is working on that he has published that you can actually pick up, most of them for free. One of them also has a paid option. So stick around to the very end to find out more about those. Remember that we do have a design competition currently going on. Today is the last day to get your submissions in, so if you haven't submitted anything, throw something together, get that added to the submission list. There is a link in the description of the episode, so make sure you follow that. Go fill out the prompts, and you should be good to go. And we will be announcing the winner of the episode next week. I'll also be packaging all of the submissions into a nice little PDF that I will share with the community, so look forward to that as well. And finally, before we get started, if you'd like to support the show, be sure to interact, like, share the episodes with new people so we can continue to grow the community. If you want to be interviewed or you want to hang out and chat, join our Discord server. And if you'd like to support the channel financially, check out any of the affiliate links in the description of the show. It helps me out a little bit if you buy something through there, and then you get to add a new RPG book or whatever to your collection. So if you're interested in that, check out those links. Otherwise, let's get started. Welcome. I have Satya here with me from Paris, I believe, correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. So welcome. Excited to have you on. And why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started in tabletop role-playing games?
Yeah. So thanks for having me. So I started tabletop role playing games actually a bit like 8 years ago. I think it's not famous abroad, but in France we have an audio series that was quite infamous like 10 or 15 years ago, which was a parody of Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, and it actually got me started in tabletop role playing games. So it was very much parodic. There were comedic situations, and it really made it a D&D tried to approach it with every tropes and everything. So I got started with comedic tabletop role playing games, and after that I tried to. So I found all of the other games that existed. So I'm still trying to test any new things now and then. Yeah.
So what system do you end up playing the most now?
Nowadays, I've used to play a horror system, which is actually called Don't Rest Your Head. I can't remember from who, but it's a system where you have to manage different resources, just like Sanity in Call of Cthulhu. But it's a bit more focused on individual horror, I guess. So yeah, I played a bit of that recently, and also homebrews and rules. I've tried to play tests on my own. So yeah.
And how many players do you have?
Generally or regularly?
Let's go regularly.
Uh, it's really hard. I would say the regulars are about two or three. Um, and sometimes, and most of the times, I try to make people discover what a tabletop role playing game is. So it could be one-to-one sessions, and we just make up a story with particular system, or I'd say 3 to 4 players. But I've tried for one shots to go for 5 players and once six, but I always feel like it's much more harder to share and yeah, to share and to balance. I would say the system, the game, but also the time in which they can speak and play. Actually, so yeah, that's why I try to stay to 3 to 4 players.
And you mentioned that you do have one-on-one sessions with people occasionally.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it was because I didn't have any more players. So I've tried a few more times to have one-on-one sessions. At first, it was much more to have, I would say, flashbacks or to build up more consistent backgrounds for players and characters. But actually, because it was much more easier to plan. So yeah, I've ended up making a bit more sessions on one-to-one and much more horror sessions on one-to-one. So yeah, I've experimented ways to make it horror games more personal, I would say.
Do you
So
find
yeah.
that the horror elements are easier to pull off when you just have one player?
Yeah, yeah. For multiple reasons. First, I would say it's much more easier to also be aware of emotional security because before every game, I repeat that we are here to play, and even if we're here to play horror games, um, the events or the characters should not make you uncomfortable, or at least um, uncomfortable that will, I would say, make you after the game not at ease. So it's much more easier to take into account emotional security when you're in one-to-one, but also then to try to reach this their limits to approach what really interests the people. So most of the time, all the players have the kind of the same personality and the same interest for what they're or the same goals in what they're looking for in the game. But once I've really felt that like 2 people were really involved in the story and were quite, I would say, not afraid, but at least uncomfortable. But like 2 others were just like, yeah, okay, we don't mind. So it kind of made it a bit, yeah, hard to balance. So I really liked playing on one-to-one.
Do you find are there more challenges, or I guess what are the challenges of running a 1v1 game compared to running a game with more people?
Um, I'd say the real challenge is uh, is to embrace much more silences. Because I would say when you're in a group, you're kind of interacting with more than one person, so it's much. I'd say it's much more easier to feel silences or blanks. But when you're just in front of one person and both of you just yeah, play and make an interactive storytelling, um, you kind of like sometimes there are just silences because you didn't have time to plan everything, for example, or there are improvisations. So it's much more your player. notices much more easier when you improvise or when you're being a bit lost in how you improvise. So I guess I'm a bit nervous, and I really like to control and plan all of the things before going into sessions. But yeah, the real challenge, but also the real lesson from making a one-to-one session is like to, yeah, sometimes uh, things just add up, but because you're interacting, you're much more keen to also listen to the other player. I would say. I don't know if it's I don't know if it was clear.
Yeah, you can really focus in on what that player kind of wants to do or what they're experiencing
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
spreading that out between the table. I do get what you're saying about the silences though, because I think even when you have multiple players, if you're taking time to think and figure out what the next step is, sometimes the players will talk amongst themselves, right, while they're kind of
yeah,
waiting for you. So, but in this case, there's nobody else for the person to talk to besides you. So it would almost feel as though those moments are kind of drawn out a little bit.
yeah. Um, I don't know. Uh, I feel it. At first it was I would say a bit embarrassing, but the more I tried to make one-to-one sessions and the more I felt like it was natural to have silences, and much more it could make players experience in another way the game. So I don't know.
I would say with the horror genre specifically, um, pauses also probably would help to kind of reinforce the kind of the
Yeah,
anticipation of the genre more so than maybe like an action style game would.
yeah, actually, yeah, yeah, of course, because when I pause and when I make silences, I always try to make my comeback, I would say, much more surprising, or like my sense was anticipated and was like I wanted to make a sense. But sometimes I just yeah, sometimes you just need some air or just 5 seconds pause, and I try to yeah, to play with those silence and to like, I don't know, like in games and even in action games, I like to focus on rhythm and to make even if there are actions or I don't know, confrontations, fights. I like to make the ambience and the tension builds up, and silences are really useful. And I was very afraid of it before, even in even in natural conversation. I'm really afraid of silences. But yeah, in play and using it as, I wouldn't say as a mechanic, but as at least as a storytelling tool, it can really be powerful, even outside horror games. At least that's how I felt when using silences.
I think that's a good way to look at it as just another tool. I know when I first started running games, that was one of my biggest um, nervous things too. Is I was worried that as I'm thinking like, oh, okay, everybody's waiting for me to
Yeah,
tell them what happens next, and it kind of puts you on a spotlight, and it can be kind of scary the first couple times. And then as you play a couple more times, you realize like the silence doesn't really matter that much. But then you're kind of taking it to the next level, and then now not just not worrying about it, but actually trying to incorporate it and using those kind of natural breaking points to just further the storytelling aspect of the game.
yeah,
Um, and you mentioned wanting to talk a little bit about storytelling, so I think that's a good segue. Um, let's talk about storytelling in games.
yeah. Um, Actually, I wanted to. So I've tried. I've tried not. that many games, but I've tried indie games that have much more different storytelling methods and system. I haven't tried yet a GM-less game, but I was really interested in how we can share the storytelling and how everyone can be the GM at the same time or anything. But so yeah, so far I really like being a GM. But so storytelling, I've tried different approaches during like my 6, 7, 8 years of playing. I've actually played Tales from the Loop, um, which has which play in which players are only playing scenes, and there are ellipses between them, and there is a continuity between those scenes, but it's approached much more like a movie where like if there is nothing to talk about between those scenes, let's just skip it and let's go to the other thing. And like um storytelling uh feels that way, not like the voice of the world, in which the characters are playing, but much more as a filmmaker, because because at first, as a GM, I wanted to describe everything that was, for example, in a room. I would say, yeah, you see dirty corners with a bit of dust. You see this rocking chair. I don't know. I would describe a lot of things, and in a bit of in an exhaustive way. So I wanted to make everything, to give a detailed and description to everything at first. But now I much more try to emphasize my description, just like a filmmaker. Like it's I much more uses theaters of mind now, um, and just make a broad description, I would say, of the room, but just like say, yeah, you see in this very corner, and the lights is maybe a bit more, I would say, I don't know, the ambience is much more darker or anything, and you see a very specific spider that you think you have, yeah, you have seen it before, I don't know, but like kind of a zoom, and I just make it very broad around it, and I, f- I feel like the description of the world and the storytelling is much more, have much more rhythm and much more emphasis on what's important or not. Like I don't know if it was clear.
So I'll just repeat it back to you just to make sure
Yeah,
I've got it. I think I got it. So you start with a broad stroke as to like maybe the general environment that you're in, like an old dusty room or something. But then kind of each step of your description, you'd kind of zoom in on uh, more and more fine details, ending on a specific like entity, like you mentioned the spider as being an important thing in the room. And is that kind of
yeah,
how you start broad and then you get really narrow?
yeah. That could be it. That's just an example. I just see it because I'm I was interested for about maybe 8 months. I tried to I don't know, to not analyze movies, but I try to have a critical view when I see it about the light, the lightnings, about colors, about zooms, about the way in which angles and in how it is filmed. And it's not much about making from a broad to narrow. It's much more about uh, just like as a game master, you're the filmmaker. You have the camera, and you decide what you show. It could be you can show something very broad. You can show something in very specific details. You can show something that has distorted colors, or that is I don't know, moving or dynamic. I don't know. So it's much more about focusing on impressions and on uh, yeah, controlling the storytelling.
So
I don't know.
I think really what you're trying to say is that you're so like you mentioned the camera analogy, you're really being very intentional with what you choose to show the
Yeah,
players, and depending on what you choose to show them, I mean, they could be in the same location, but depending on what angle you kind of shoot from,
yeah,
is they may get different impressions of the same place.
yeah, totally. Yeah, because I really like how in movies, what you don't see, you take for granted that what you don't see doesn't exist, but actually it does, and it's my way of seeing how the characters and the players are involved in it, because most of the time they're not frustrated, but they want more details about what they don't see, about what I don't describe, and it makes it much more like I at least I try to make my players interested in what is not seen on the camera, to let them want to think about what is outside of my camera, or what I'm focusing on.
And then as they ask questions, then you can kind of move that camera around to show them the
Yeah,
things that they're interested in.
yeah, and actually in horror, I've really liked, I really like not turning that camera, just saying, yeah, there's something, but you don't know what, you can't say for sure, and the camera stays in the same position, and the players are aware that there is something, but there are I don't know, there are no ways to turn or anything, so I don't know. And yeah, so that's the way I try to approach. So I'm a bit sorry if I don't explain it much well in English. I'm sorry, but yeah, that's the way I try nowadays to approach storytelling. And the other thing I wanted to tell, much more easier, is I was very I relied uh, exclusively on visual descriptions at first, and as I said, exhaustive visual descriptions, like you see those chair, you see those things, you see like. And nowadays, as I said, I tend to remove some details when I describe things, and I try to add impressions, to add I don't know, temperature feeling, or smells or anything. And the other thing I wanted to tell is how I try to share storytelling, um, because I try to make my players engage in the world in which they are playing, and I've tried to like just tell them, yeah, I bring you this broad description of a dark room with which has dusty corners and everything. What are your impressions? What do you think you're seeing? What do you think you're smelling? Um, and in that way, I don't I don't validate or invalidate what are the impressions of the characters, but actually, for horror games, uh, like the players just gave me ideas that way, because they're like, oh, there must be something very terrible hiding in that corner or anything. And I think so the character just says he has the impression of being, I don't know, observed from this dusty corner, just like there's something hiding, just tiny, but also dangerous. And letting the players just uh, bring the characters' impressions that could be true or not, um, makes the storytelling and the experience very different. Uh, yeah,
So that's an interesting way to handle it because in some systems they'll say, you know, in that same scenario, ask them a question and then whatever they tell you is true about the world. So,
yeah,
in that case, you would say, I think there's, a monster here or something, and then you'd say, yes, there is. It's exactly what you were afraid of. But what you're saying is you're just saying what is the impression that your character has, and
yeah.
they could be experiencing something, but that may not necessarily actually be true, right? So they could go to that corner and pull a sheet up, and there's nothing there, right?
Yeah, totally. And in horror, because I really like psychological horror, and not most of the time, but I would say often I try to I don't let the characters verify their hypothesis or their impressions. So that could be true, that could be not true. Even I, as a game master, I don't know. And it's just the impression. And because they have felt or they had the impression of something was hiding in that dusty corner, and because I don't know, the room closes and they have to get out of here very quickly, they will never know if something was hiding or not. And so that gives so sometimes I validate or invalidate after the impression, but sometimes I also like to just don't say anything. And sometimes after the sessions or the tabletop role playing games, they when we debrief, when we make debriefings, they just say, "Oh, that moment was really not scary, but was really uncomfortable," because they just bring up their own imagination into the game and their own storytelling. And at least in horror, that makes it much more personal and much more appealing and at the same time frightening in a way. So yeah,
And even so, in those scenarios, even with the danger, maybe it's there, maybe it's not, and maybe even unspoken, the um, the like you said, the mind of the player just wondering and having some suspense about it and just not knowing
yeah,
probably can do more to the player than just telling them would.
yeah. Actually, yeah.
I think that's a
So
a
oh,
pretty neat way to approach it, and I feel like thinking back on some of like the horror movies and TV shows that I've seen, they do often do that where the characters are really adamant that something is in a certain place or something, and then it's maybe not. Um, but the characters don't know that, and then sometimes the camera will pan to something else that the audience sees as like, okay, there was danger here, but the characters were maybe misled or whatever.
yeah. And actually, I'm also running a campaign, which is much more adventure and everything. And I've tried to test this storytelling tool, I would say, and it really worked in a way. It wasn't to make it personal horror, but to make personal experiences for characters. So as I said, I tried to make rhythm and make the tension builds up. But sometimes I like to make the tension just go down. And during those moments, for example, there was an explosion in the game, and I just said there is an explosion, and during this state of confusion, you're trying to assess and you're trying to analyze what is the how it is disrupted, or what are destroyed or anything. And I just said, yo, yeah, you can tell me what was destroyed, and that can be true, that can be so or much more. I think I've asked, give me the impression of your character that the about their impression of danger, or the impression of insecurity, or I don't know.
I think of this conversation at least. I think that that question, the what is your impression of this situation? I think I'm definitely going to steal that and start using that because, um, like you said, you can make it real, you can make it not real, you can no comment on it. You don't have to validate it or
Yeah,
invalidate it. And then it also, you kind of mentioned it earlier, it also gives you new ideas, right? So
yeah,
the
totally.
players can start suggesting things that you can then weave into the story if you want to, but you're also not committed to using them either if they just aren't gonna fit.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and at least for now, I've from the from what the players with which I play, they really like those moments when I try to share storytelling, because there's like it's they feel comfortable because all the story is set up, all the scenario, and they can they are uh, they are in the story, but also they have a bit of power, just a tiny bit, and yeah, it just makes it more personal. So much more like when you're reading a book on your looking at the movie adaptation. When reading the book, you had your idea of what the character looked like, of what the I don't know, so of what the how the event just was visually seeing, or the others and everything, and that gives, I would say, just a tiny bit of power to the audience, or in our case, in tabletop role playing games, to the players, and that makes it much more interactive in the way of um, storytelling, I'd say.
Do you think that having them give the impressions also helps them kind of get into character and role play a little bit as well as whatever character they're controlling?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know if it makes it. I don't know if it's a cause, or I don't know if it's a consequence of being actually involved, or maybe a bit of both. I would say it makes them involved in the role play, and at the same time, the more they do it, and the more it's a consequence of being involved. So at least that's how I felt. It's beneficial, and also um, I when before starting games, I always let my players aware that that I will let them describe some things, and during so before going into the sessions, I ask, does somebody so is somebody uncomfortable with describing their impression, and if so, just tell me now, or just tell me during this session, and I will just come up with the impression your character have. So because some players, at least I can think of one player that was really involved in the game, and actually involved in his character, but couldn't get into the describing phase or describing tool, because I don't know. I think it was too much effort for them. I don't know.
Yeah, and I that can happen. I've had some players who would rather um, just be a part of the story
Yeah,
and just maybe aren't comfortable coming up with details or don't feel like it's their place to come up with the details of certain things. Um, so I can see where you would potentially have players that just that's not quite what they want to do. I do think that when you're just asking for their impression, I think it takes a little bit of pressure off of them because what what their impression is doesn't have to be true, right? So they can say I feel like this is happening, and you can, as the DM, can be like, that's not actually happening, but that doesn't invalidate what your character is experiencing at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. That's why most of the time I like I don't say it most, but often I really like not giving much more information about this impression because I've actually have had an experience where I've asked about the impression and I invalidated just after that, and the player was really frustrated and felt not your and felt like I was saying this is not your character's impression that's fault. It's you as a player that is false in your storytelling, and that was a bit. So I really learned from this time, and so nowadays I before the sessions I really make my players aware, but and tell them when I invalidate the impression, it's not for you as a player, it's for your characters, it's for what they think they're seeing. And actually, as I said, I really want to try out games where there is no game masters and all the players just share this role of storytelling to just try out and see how we can moderate storytelling. How yeah. So I'm really curious about those games.
Are you familiar with Iron Sworn? Because I know that one has a GM-less mode that you can play.
Yeah, and actually, I wanted to play the solo mode. Uh, but there's just too much games out there. Just wanted to add about this impression tool, storytelling tool. Um, at least in horror or also in adventure, um, what I really like in horror is the fact that most like in what when I read or watch, there are, I like to separate the stories in which the characters in which the plot is character focused and the ones in which it is plot and scenario focused. And I really like those because most of the time characters or mortals or humans are just completely hopeless and much more it's they are they can't even apprehend what's happening. So of course in the Lovecraft's novels or short stories, most of the time the in the original short stories the characters they try to have a grasp on what's happening, but they just can't because it's just outside their reach, and because it's just so outside their reach, it makes that feeling and that impression that uncomfortable because they always try to bring up theories and also to bring up theories about, oh, it's happening because of me, because of something personal, but actually it's absolutely it has nothing to do with the character. And I like may I don't know if it's vicious or not, but I like when my players feel that way. I like when they see like, okay, there's a story, okay, my character is just hopeless without they can have actions, but it it depends. I can have consequences on the plot, but all of the plot in the scenario does not only depend on my character or on my on the character personally.
Right. So the story is kind of moving along with or without the
Yeah,
players, essentially. How do you handle prep for your games?
it really depends. Um, as I've said, I've at first I've played a lot of one shots, and it was much more easier to be exhaustive, to have all the descriptions um, prepared beforehand before the sessions. And most of the time, my one shots were in a specific locations, and the characters couldn't be they couldn't get out of this location, or they couldn't get in or anything, so they were just restricted. So it was much more easier to just have an exhaustive preparation, just to write up, or I don't write up descriptions entirely. I just take notes and adjectives. So, for example, about the dusty corner, I wouldn't write sentences. I would just write dusty and corner, and I would just try to improvise on that. But yeah, I will have a lot of adjective. But nowadays, because I tend to have much more longer sessions and campaigns, uh, I I I have I have all the scenario planned with guidelines, but because I tried to let myself remember that it's not only my story, it's also the story of the characters, and the characters can have impacts. I just plan general guidelines, but for the next sessions, have a little bit of more descriptions to have latitude when characters just make something that I couldn't predict, but that is valuable and that I want to make yeah valuable in the story. So I just accept it, and so next sessions I just have to yeah to modify my guidelines. So, and because it's really frustrating when you have all everything planned ahead, but the players just break your scenario where when giving an idea, and I really don't like just telling, oh no, this doesn't work, and just and without any explanation. So yeah.
Right. Just because I didn't plan it isn't necessarily a good reason to tell them no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so light notes on kind of some descriptions and depending on how, like you mentioned, how tight it is, if it's super important that you have a bunch of things planned out or not, or what the restrictions are. Otherwise, you try to let the players do as much as they can, as creatively as they can, and then just kind of modify your notes going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. For example, like 2 days ago, I've run a session where I wanted my players to look for a particular character, and I really like this character, and I wanted them to um, to see this character because they haven't seen this character yet, and I've made several hints about her, but they didn't want to meet her. So they just like, no, we will go in a different um, direction. So I I I could have just make up an explanation on just how they just have to go there, but it's just like I've tried to for this time I've tried to think of how important was this character for the scenario and the player's experience, and I was just like, no, it's just because I like this character and I just want them to meet her, but actually they can make it another way, so I just accept it, even if it's a bit frustrating because I have prepared some things for this character, but yeah, she will get her own scene, and she will get there, I hope.
So just be may not show up in the way that you planned, but hopefully we'll get to reuse some of the
Yeah.
characters and encounters and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you tend to play more like social heavy games or combat heavy games?
definitely not combat heavy games. Uh, I don't know why. I'd say maybe because I haven't had the opportunity. So I don't know. I don't know if it's something I shouldn't say, but I've actually never played D&D, so the original D&D. But yeah, or actually, for more combat focused on more strategic games, uh, I I much more have played tabletop games or video games alone without role playing game. I don't know why. So yeah, I know why because it takes much more time, much more preparation also. But yeah, so it's much more about interactions. But I always feel more at ease when I have at least a bit of a system um, to make uncertainty come up during the game or during the storytelling.
And you mentioned that you were working on a tabletop role playing game. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, yeah, actually. So I have a niche.io account. So all my project comes under the username. I have the Gates of Truth. And so yeah, recently, for about I think it was 2 years ago, I've made I don't know how I can call it, but I would say uh, learning sessions or classes about game design, tabletop game design, and I really liked it. It's actually about it's really close to what I'm studying. And so yeah, during my free time, I've tried to playtest some systems just during my own time, and for about 6 or 7 months, I think now, I have published a few games for game jams. And nowadays I'm working on 3 projects, so I can alternate when I when I feel exhausted. And it's actually so I have 2 games which is much more social in interactions, and one game which has where I wanted to make a tabletop role playing game with cards game mechanics. So just like Magic the Gathering.
Okay, so you said that you're making a tabletop role playing game, but it's got like card game mechanics in it. And how far along is that one of your published ones?
Actually, so all my 3 projects are in early access. So I've published the playtest kits. So I'm actually running playtests, and so it's taking a bit of time. So the systems are ready, and the system work, but all the balancing needs especially for the card game one playtests are really important. And actually, I've made a playtest 3 days ago, which was really valuable because I've learned so much from a player with which I've played. But yeah, all of them are published. So to give a bit of presentation. So for the 3 projects, I have one which is a tabletop role inspired by Ace Attorney, which is a video game about an attorney where you were in court and you have to defend your client. So it has rules, and it's meant for 3 players. So one player will play the defense, the other player will play the prosecution, and the third player will play the judge. And so I have a system where meant to be played for confrontations between defense and prosecution, and the judge also have attributes. So yeah, my second game is much more adventure inspired by um, mangas and animes, such as Attack on Titan or anything. So it's much more adventure and something like that. And so the last one, which is To the Gates of Truth, um, where you play seekers that are trying to reach the gates of truth. But for that, they have to elevate their selves into an existential journey, and they are helped with entities. And so yeah, you play those seekers along this journey, and it has um, card game mechanics, and also so I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it has um, a roguelike architecture.
Sure. Yep, where you can play a session and then kind of re you kind of restart.
It's actually whenever you make a session, it will be different from the last one. And I have I have this system where um, the location in which you begin as a seeker is different from the last session, because there are ways to die or to lose your to fail your journey to the gates of truth. So you just have to come back to the beginning with another character or with the same character, but each time you make an attempt, it will be different with different entities. Actually, for a bit more description, so each entity has a celestial island in which they welcome seekers, but the order. So I have 8 different celestial islands which are designed, but during a session, only 3 of them will be seen. And so between 2 players or 2 groups, the experience will be different. And to each celestial island, there will be proper cards. So cards are powers, passives, weapons, and also enemies. So yeah, and each celestial island has their own gameplay mechanics.
And can this be played solo?
Actually, we've I've tried to make it solo, and it could be. It can definitely be, um, because the enemies have strategies, and so so the characters, so the players know how the enemies are going to behave themselves. So I haven't already tried, but in the way I've designed it, it's actually being. So a friend of mine is actually developing a kind of video game of the system, but I've tried to design it as it can be played solo. Yeah,
Yeah, it sounds really cool, and I'm a sucker for card games, so
yeah, yeah. That's
I will
cool.
definitely have to check that out. And you said there's a playtest kit of this one?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, the playlist is not updated because so for all the things I have modified from the last a playtest from 3 days ago. But yeah, a playtest of the original system is actually available. And so actually, it's my first game I wanted it to make as a paid project. But all my games can be. Yeah, I have on itch.io you can make community copies available. So if someone doesn't want to pay or can't pay, they can just take the game, try it, and come back later if they loved if they love the experience or just want to share their experience.
Sure. So yeah, it's easy for people to test it out and then see if they
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
basically want to get the full product. And I suppose since you're just in playtesting now, you probably don't have a full product ready to go yet, or like a
okay.
completed, like people probably can't purchase it yet.
They can because there is no difference between the free version and the paid version.
Ah, got it.
So it's just like if someone can't afford it, So I've just decided that yeah, I didn't want it to make them yeah just if you can't afford it but just interesting, you can get it's absolutely the same game between the two versions.
Sure.
But of course, um, when I update the game, those two versions will be updated.
And then is it just like I assume it's like print and play, so you get like a PDF of everything and then you can just print that out on your own?
Yeah, for now, yeah, yeah. I've set up I've set up remote playtests on a website which is called playingcards.io, which is just a tabletop simulator. And I've uploaded all the cards that are already designed, and I've made this file because you can export a file from this website, and I've shared this file so everyone can playtest with this same file of
And then I guess the next question is the game in French or English or both?
no, yeah, it's actually in English, but I'm it's really difficult because actually at first I have designed the game like the effects of the cards in French, but no, everything on the itch.io page is in English, and with my friend, which is also French, we have decided to for the first version to write in English because it's much more easier to have playtests and yeah feedbacks.
Sure, that's probably, I don't know if it's just due to population or whatever, but I assume it may be somewhat limiting if you're only doing it in the French language versus doing it in the English language.
Yeah, I don't know. It really depends. I have published a game in French. Sorry. It really depends because I haven't got the opportunity to reach out the tabletop role playing community in France. So yeah, thanks to the internet, I have much more contact with with players uh, abroad. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I will definitely check that out, and there will be a link um, to your itch.io page for sure in the show notes, so anybody listening can go ahead and check that out. Um, I had a great time having you on and chatting with you today. So um, I hope that your card game you get more playtest feedback and well
Yeah.
all of your products. And I hope that you are successful with those because they sound like pretty fun projects to be working on.
Yeah. Thanks, and thanks for having me, and yeah, for listening to you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Dungeon Masters Toolkit podcast. You can find links to all of the products and resources that we talked about on the show in the show notes. And if you'd like to join the community or find out how to be on the show, check out our subreddit or join us in our Discord server.